This is the story of how Barry Gibb, the legendary voice of the Bee Gees, revealed the depth of his six-decade connection with Britain's most successful male pop artist, Cliff Richard. Teenage admiration evolved into one of music's most enduring friendships, and the truth about their relationship goes deeper than most fans ever knew. These two giants of British pop music maintained a bond for over 60 years that produced secret collaborations, posthumous tributes, and surprisingly candid revelations about mutual influence. We're uncovering the real story behind Barry and Cliff's relationship, told through their own words and verified through their collaborative work. Back in 1957, before the Bee Gees became household names and before Staying Alive dominated dance floors worldwide, a teenage Barry Gibb played in a skiffle group called the Rattlesnakes with his brothers in Manchester. Most people don't know this, but the young Gibb's musical diet included heavy doses of Cliff Richard. When the brothers were learning their craft, they weren't just covering American rock and roll. They were performing Cliff Richard songs alongside tracks from Paul Anka, Buddy Holly, and the Everly Brothers. The timing here matters because in 1958, Cliff Richard released Move It, widely considered Britain's first authentic rock and roll song. John Lennon himself put it this way: "Before Cliff Richard and Move It, there was nothing worth listening to in England." Barry Gibb was absorbing these influences at the exact moment British rock music was being born. Barry has confirmed this directly, naming Cliff Richard among his primary musical influences during this formative period, alongside Tommy Steele, the Mills Brothers, and the Everly Brothers. This wasn't casual admiration. Cliff's music was literally in Barry's set list as he developed the skills that would later define the Bee Gees sound. Jump ahead to 1968, when the Bee Gees are international stars with their distinctive harmonies captivating audiences worldwide, and they write a beautiful, moody ballad that would become one of their most beloved songs. That song is Words. But here's what Barry and the Bee Gees later revealed. They originally wrote words for Cliff Richard. The brothers composed this soulful ballad specifically with Cliff in mind and offered it to him. Cliff showed interest, but only as an album track, not as a single release. That decision changed everything because the Bee Gees decided to record it themselves with Barry taking the lead vocal. Words reached number 8 on the UK singles chart, number 15 in the United States, and hit number 1 in Germany, Switzerland, Netherlands, and China. The song became such a standard that Elvis Presley himself covered it, performing Words during his Las Vegas concerts from 1968 to 1974. With a version appearing on Elvis's 1970 live album. Cliff Richard probably thought about what might have been, and that single decision to pass on recording it as a single meant the Bee Gees kept one of their signature songs. But it also reveals something telling. Even in 1968, when the Bee Gees were already successful, they still thought of Cliff Richard first when they had something special to offer. Now let's talk about what Cliff Richard has said publicly about Barry Gibb and the Bee Gees, because this is where the depth of their connection becomes crystal clear. In his 2020 autobiography, The Dreamer, Cliff wrote something that stops you cold. "Working with Barry from the Bee Gees, my all-time favorite band, bar none. My dream just kept finding more and more ways to come true. My all-time favorite band, bar none." This isn't a casual compliment from one colleague to another. And Cliff Richard has worked with virtually every major artist in British music history, predated the Beatles, and has had a career spanning over 6 decades. He's declaring the Bee Gees as his favorite band without any qualifications whatsoever. And he didn't just say it once, because in August 2023, during an interview at the Edinburgh Festival with Gloria Hunniford, Cliff reiterated the same message. "The Bee Gees are my favorite band. They made the most incredible records." When Robin Gibb passed away in 2012, Cliff paid tribute as a friend, stating that the Bee Gees' legacy was stunningly good stuff, right on a par with the Beatles. The weight of that statement is staggering when you consider that Cliff Richard emerged before the Beatles, competed with them for chart dominance in the early 1960s, and has witnessed every major musical movement since. Placing the Bee Gees on par with the Beatles isn't just professional courtesy. It's a profound artistic judgment from someone who has earned the right to make it. The most significant collaboration between Barry and Cliff happened during an emotionally charged period in the early 2000s, and the story behind it reveals just how deep their connection ran. January 2001 arrived with Barry Gibb and his son Ashley writing a song specifically for Cliff Richard called I Cannot Give You My Love. And they recorded a demo at Middle Ear Studios in Miami Beach with Maurice Gibb playing keyboards. But then tragedy struck on January 12, 2003, when Maurice Gibb died suddenly, and the project was delayed as Barry grieved the loss of his brother and lifelong musical partner. Cliff Richard traveled to Miami in November 2003 to record at Barry's studio, and what happened next transformed a simple recording session into a tribute. Barry produced the track, played guitar, and sang backing vocals, but the final recording included Maurice Gibb's original keyboard performance from the 2001 demo. When you listen to I Cannot Give You My Love, you're hearing Maurice Gibb's final keyboard work, preserved posthumously, produced by his brother Barry, for an artist all three brothers had admired since childhood. The single reached number 13 on the UK singles chart in December 2004, while the album it appeared on, Something's Going On, reached number 7 in the UK and was certified gold. But those Miami sessions produced something else that most people don't know about, because Barry and songwriter David English wrote another track called How Many Sleeps, with the title coming from how English's daughter asked about the length of a business trip. Barry produced it during those same November 2003 sessions. What makes this recording unique is that Barry Gibb actually sings lead vocals on How Many Sleeps. It's technically a Cliff Richard single release. It was the B-side to Something Is Going On. But Barry's voice carries the melody. That's how intertwined their musical relationship had become. January 2005 brought something historic that even diehard fans might not know about. Barry Gibb, Robin Gibb, and Cliff Richard all appeared together on the same recording for the first and only time. The song was called Grief Never Grows Old, written by Mike Reed for victims of the December 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, and it was released under the artist credit One World Project on January 24, 2005, reaching number 4 on the UK singles chart. Barry recorded his vocal part from Miami Beach on January 8, 2005, while Robin recorded in London on January 6, 2005, and the production notes specifically indicate an ad-lib section featuring Barry Gibb and Cliff Richard together. This wasn't just a charity record where artists sent in isolated vocals, because the production was coordinated so that Barry and Cliff's voices would intertwine in specific moments. It's the only documented evidence we have of both Gibb brothers and Cliff Richard on the same track, a convergence of three voices that had admired each other across 6 decades. November 2006 saw Cliff Richard release an album called Two's Company, The Duets, with the concept being simple. Cliff would duet with artists he admired and who admired him. The roster was impressive, featuring Elton John, Dionne Warwick, Olivia Newton-John, and Brian May. And Barry Gibb. They chose to record Fields of Gold, Sting's 1993 classic, and the album reached number 8 on the UK albums chart and was certified gold. But what's significant isn't just the commercial success, it's what it represented, because Cliff Richard had his pick of any duet partner in popular music, and he chose Barry Gibb. Then 2018 brought something even more revealing when ITV produced a documentary called 60 Years of Cliff Richard, in public and in private, celebrating Cliff's 6-decade career with filming at Cliff's home in Portugal, at Abbey Road Studios, and at Wimbledon. And who did they interview for this documentary? Barry Gibb. Not as a casual industry colleague offering generic praise, but as someone who clearly knew Cliff personally, who had worked with him intimately, who had shared studios and songs and losses with him. Other contributors included Olivia Newton-John, Hank Marvin, Jimmy Osmond, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Brian May, and Dame Joan Collins, and Barry Gibb was positioned as part of Cliff's inner circle, the people who truly knew him. Both Barry Gibb and Cliff Richard received Knighthoods, Britain's highest honor for services to music, which puts their parallel careers in perspective. October 25, 1995, was when Cliff Richard received his knighthood from Queen Elizabeth II, making him the first pop and rock singer ever to receive this honor. Barry Gibb was knighted on June 26, 2018, by Prince Charles after receiving a CBE in 2004. When Barry received his knighthood, he said something poignant. "I hope and pray that they, his brothers, are aware of what has happened and that they are proud. By 2018, Barry was the last surviving member of the Bee Gees, with Maurice having died in 2003 and Robin in 2012. And when Robin passed, Cliff Richard was there with a public tribute, calling him another one of us who's gone too soon. These weren't distant figures exchanging formal condolences. These were friends who had traveled the same impossible journey, from teenage performers in 1950s Britain to Knights of the Realm, with all the triumphs and tragedies that came between. So what is the truth that Barry Gibb revealed about Cliff Richard? It's not a scandal or a secret rivalry, and the truth is far more meaningful than that. Barry Gibb, one of the most successful songwriters in history, a man who helped define disco and wrote #1 hits for himself and countless other artists, still remembers being a teenager in 1957 playing Cliff Richard songs in Manchester. When the Bee Gees had a beautiful ballad in 1968, they thought of Cliff first, and when Barry's brother Maurice died, Cliff flew to Miami to record in Barry's studio, while Barry made sure Maurice's final keyboard performance would live on in that collaboration. The truth lives in Cliff Richard's own words. The Bee Gees were his all-time favorite band, bar none. These weren't just two superstars orbiting the same industry. This was genuine musical kinship forged across 6 decades, documented in collaborations most fans never knew existed, and sustained through losses that would have broken lesser friendships. From 1957 to 2023, spanning 66 years, Barry Gibb and Cliff Richard maintained a connection that began with teenage influence and evolved into knighthood-level mutual respect. The real revelation isn't what Barry exposed about Cliff Richard. It's what their relationship exposes about what's possible when two artists genuinely admire each other across an entire lifetime in an industry famous for ego and competition. That's the truth. And sometimes the truth about artistic relationships is more beautiful than any scandal could ever be.